Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry.
Hello, I'm your host, Brother Adam Thayer. This is episode number 289. This week on the show, we've got a paper on secrecy, a paper on the truth, and of course, back to talking about those McMasons. First up is a post from Brother Chris Hodap on his blog Freemasons for Dummies, just titled McMasons. I came across that damn word last night again in a conversation, McMason. It's a derogatory term used in the fraternity by some to disparage their own brother Masons who received the degrees of Masonry at a one-day class event. Variations include one-day wonders, blue lightnings, fast food Masons, sidewalk to Shriners, and other not especially flattering labels. Curious, I never knew we had two classifications of Master Masons in this fraternity. I thought we were just one sacred band or society of friends and brothers who could best work or best agree. Silly me. My longtime friend and brother Nathan Brindle reminded me this morning that we were both passed to fellowcrafts and raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason 18 years ago today, just one day short of the pretentious Ides of March. It was a Saturday all-day event, and we were both raised on the floor of Calvin W. Prather Lodge 717, which was then on the north side of Indianapolis. It was their second of 3 locations throughout their history, and they have since relocated again to the east side in Lawrence. That prior building is gone now, razed and flattened several years ago, so I have nowhere to go and park and tearfully relive the day's events wrapped in melancholia. Interestingly, their first home still stands down on College Avenue, long ago sold and converted to a church, but at one time with the largest lodge room in the state. It was a curious day. Indiana had only recently started having one-day events, and our mother lodge, Broad Ripple Lodge 643, was in dire straits at the time. I joined Broad Ripple via an internet contact I made to the Grand Lodge, and Roger Van Gordon sent me their direction for reasons known only to him. When I petitioned, I mentioned it to Nathan, and he told me that he too had thought of joining the fraternity for many years himself, but never followed through. So he petitioned at the same time. I've known Nathan only a few months less than Alice, about 40 years now, so we were both happy to share the experience. I was initiated in November, but Broad Ripple was in sad shape. They would go on to lose 5 members from the officers' line in the next 12 months, and came close to deciding to just give up and turn in their charter. At my first meeting, David Bosworth, a Prather Lodge past master, showed up and announced he had been appointed as a Grand Lodge representative, and was sent to find out just what the hell was going on at Broad Ripple. Things were not good at the new lodge I had just joined unwittingly. Indeed, the lodge was unable to confer the remaining degrees on Nathan and me for 3 months until they finally gave up and sent us to the one-day class at Prather, simply out of despair. But God loved the dedication of true brothers. Worshipful Brother Don Seeley was about the only serious ritualist we had at Ripple, but he was mighty good at it. He was the only member we had who knew the master's part for all 3 degrees flawlessly, and delivered them all with passion. He knew Prather didn't have a strong lineup either, and they were holding the class that Saturday because they were the mother lodge of then Grand Master Robert Hancock. He wanted to show the state how these could work. So, Prather had 3 men who needed all 3 degrees, and we had Nathan and myself. Worshipful Brother Seeley called them and said he'd cheerfully volunteer to do the master's part for the Fellowcraft and Master Mason for all 5 of us candidates, but his condition was that Nathan and I would have our second section of the Master Mason conferred individually all the way through. Then he'd do it all over again for the other 3 men together, however Grandmaster Hancock stipulated. It would make for a crushingly long and for many tedious day, but Nathan and I got to have our individual Master Mason degree experience just as it was meant to be, which makes us both sort of hybrids. We are sort of one-day class Masons, but we aren't. There aren't any photographs of that day. I think everybody was just sick and tired of the place when the day's festivities finally ended, that they fled out of sheer terror that somebody might decide to fire up the Royal Arch degrees at the last minute. Nathan and I looked almost identical when we joined, although he was already starting to lose hair up top. He's gone gray since then, taking on sort of a George R.R. Martin look, while I have retained my boyish floppy mane for almost 5 decades, apart from that whole radiation and chemo thing. It took a while before local Masons could remember which one of us was Hodap and which one was Brindle. The ladies in the Grand Lodge office eventually gave up in despair. I'm finally just settled on referring to both of us as simply Brindap. That seemed to solve it for most folks. The lodge elected me in despair as senior warden 9 months later, and Nathan as junior warden. And a month past my second anniversary as an entered apprentice, they made me the worshipful master of Broad Ripple number 643. We didn't close or turn in the charter, and Nathan followed me to the east the next year. With dedication and hard work and stubborn bullheadedness. Our mother lodge is now one of the most vibrant ones in Indiana, and I'll put our little lodge up against any in the country for excellence in every aspect. Nathan has gone on to serve as secretary or recorder of at least 6 Masonic organizations that I can think of, including the only secretary that the Masonic Society has ever had, with a couple of thousand members to keep track of. We both served on the Indianapolis Masonic Temple Board for our downtown landmark building, and have served on numerous Grand Lodge committees. We both were part of the Knights of the North who wrote Laudable Pursuit anonymously in 2004, which has been influential to lodges and Grand Lodges all over the country, and whose members were principally the founders of the Masonic Society. Ideas in that long paper also helped to impact what has become the traditional observance or European concept or observant lodge model in the U.S. We were both founding members of Lodge Vitruvian 767, itself a European concept lodge. Nathan went on to serve as a top officer in the Scottish Rite Valley of Indianapolis and is now a trustee for that magnificent cathedral. And he's done countless other things locally, statewide, and nationally to help and influence the fraternity. Meanwhile, most of you know some of what I went on to do. Just a couple of us poor old dumb McMasons. My whole point in relating this long soggy tale, of which every one of you has your own variation, is that Freemasonry is not about being a memorization club. It's not about the minutiae of how degrees are conferred. It's different all over the world, and just because it's one way where you came from, it's not that way everywhere. Yet all these men are your brethren too, just as us McMasons in lodge with you. Every single Mason has the power to make a difference in his lodge, his district, his state, his country, and the world, whether he received his degrees a month apart, a year apart, or an hour apart. It's what he does when he walks out of that temple building that makes the difference. But it's also how you treat him when he sits in lodge with you. An ashlar doesn't polish itself, and the most certain way to make absolutely sure you never see that brother in lodge a second time is to tell him that he's some sort of second-class Mason simply because his lodge chose to send him to a one-day class for some reason you may not be privy to. It's been studied countless times over the last 40 years by Grand Lodges. The participation rate of traditionally raised Masons over one-day Masons is identical. How they got there makes absolutely zero difference. How they are treated by their lodges and their brethren, along with their own personal desire and dedication, is what matters. Michael Shirley, over on the Midnight Freemasons blog, recently talked about this concerning those who regard one-day class participants as somehow deficient, and observed they are setting themselves up as arbiters of what a Mason is, as if they themselves are on some Masonic pedestal to which these inadequate brethren must aspire. If you seriously believe a one-day class Mason is somehow deficient of something, then get off your own ass and teach him, instead of sneering at him for something that was almost assuredly not even his decision in the first place. Otherwise, the next time you feel some adolescent urge to blurt out McMason to a man who's your brother, put a sock in it, and maybe think about what you've accomplished for the good of the order lately instead. And if he's shoveling harder and faster than you, go to work alongside him, or at least thank him. At least he's building something. What are you doing? All right, up next we have a piece by Brother Roger M. Firestone, 32nd degree KCCH, entitled Why Secrecy? Freemasonry is usually referred to by outsiders as a secret society. We have generally objected to this characterization, claiming that we are not members of a secret society, but rather of a society with secrets. We allow our members to wear insignia, do not conceal the location of our lodge buildings, hold public cornerstone laying, and welcome new members from men of good character who have but to ask to join. Webster's Dictionary would agree with the general public, however, defining the term secret society as any of various oath-bound societies having a secret ritual and so on. The craft certainly fits that definition. Matters of definition aside, however, the characterization of Freemasonry by its secrets has caused difficulties for the fraternity for quite some time. During some periods of history, the keeping of secrets was considered to be evidence of plotting against the regime or the established church. Recent events in Italy concerning a secret so-called Masonic lodge known as Propaganda Due and its involvement with highly placed government officials indicate that this was not always a far-fetched assumption. Nowadays, with matters once reserved for the bedroom to be found on television every evening, and most government bodies subject to sunshine laws, the keeping of secrets by a social group seems anachronistic, if not downright suspicious. Many of us have been asked, If there's nothing wrong with it, why do you keep it secret? Well, why do Masons keep secrets? It is not enough to say that we have traditionally always done so, or that we are obliged to do so. These answers simply push the question further back into Masonic history. The maintenance of secrecy is one of the first duties to which a man who becomes a Mason agrees. After the symbolic degrees, the first degree conferred in the Scottish Rite, Secret Master, and the last, Master of the Royal Secret, both indicate by their names that secrecy is a vital part of the rite. A matter deemed so important by those who created the Masonic ritual is definitely worth further examination by all of us. To be sure, we are perhaps under some kind of delusion if we think that the ritual secrets of Freemasonry are truly secret. More than one false brother has chosen to reveal the entire contents of the Masonic ritual to the public. Although such exposés were more common and certainly more sensational during the earlier part of Masonic history, complete plain text copies of our work are available today in shops in many large cities. There is nothing to prevent any of the profane from purchasing such a volume and learning the entire contents of the ritual, even the crypts, signs, and words. Masonic jewelry is readily purchased. Only the use of a dues card ensures that we will not sit and lodge with counterfeits, while we must rely on general honesty of the population not to be imposed upon in the streets by strangers wearing the appropriate pin. These days, curiosity about Masonry is at a low ebb, and there does not seem to be much market for such illicit material. This may, of course, be related to the current membership problem, but that is a different topic altogether. If, as was once remarked, the secret of Freemasonry is that there are no secrets to Freemasonry, a dues card would seem like a flimsy distinction between the initiated and the profane. When the entire ritual can be obtained from a book, there must be something else that distinguishes Freemasons from the rest of the world, and that justifies the emphasis made on secrecy within the craft. There are several parts to the answer. Perhaps the most obvious difference is the nature of the experience. Becoming a Master Mason is a process that requires effort on the part of the candidate. He must seek out our institution, have a petition signed, provide an initiation fee, appear at the proper times for the degrees, and commit the appropriate information to memory. Someone who merely reads the ritual is, on the other hand, totally passive. A psychological experiment on imprinting, the process whereby young animals come to recognize their mother by following her, is informative. An experimental group of infant animals was treated with a muscle relaxant before the imprinting process, while the control group was given a sham treatment. Normal imprinting took place for the control group. However, the experimental animals failed to become imprinted on their mother. The muscle relaxant had prevented the young animals from exerting much effort to follow their mother about. Without effort, there is no learning. Since the purpose of the Masonic degrees is to impart useful knowledge, the result of this experiment suggests that the initiate who puts effort into joining the fraternity is far more likely to derive value from the experience than one who only pursues the ritual in a book. Another major reason why secrecy is advocated for the knowledge imparted by Freemasonry is to impart the lessons that our teachings are valuable. We leave many inexpensive items lying carelessly about our homes and our offices, whereas truly valuable items are kept locked in safe deposit boxes or other repositories, or are carried with us at all times. In Poe's story, The Purloined Letter, many hiding places are searched for the letter. Having been left in plain view, it is overlooked as worthless. Since knowledge per se cannot be locked up physically, keeping it secret is the method used to restrict its circulation and ownership. If the teachings of Freemasonry were made available to anyone as a matter of routine, it would indicate to both members and outsiders that we attach only a modest value to them. Instead, we have spent centuries of effort keeping the truths of Masonry secret and passing them down the generations by memory. This should convince us that what we have labored so hard to possess is valuable indeed. We should also recognize that secrecy is an integral characteristic of individuals and groups. Within each of our families, we have information that is ours privately and is not the business of outsiders. The breadwinner's salary, children's problems at school, the happy experiences of courtship, the contents of one's last will. All these are things we naturally choose to keep within the bosom of our family and would not care to have it made public. In the same way, we as Masons refer to ourselves by the family term of brothers, and thus the secrets of Masons and Masonry are our right to keep to ourselves as members of the Masonic family. For outsiders to demand that we give up our secrets, no less any other of our ancient practices, is as much an invasion of privacy as would be demanding a videotape of one's wedding night. One of the more horrifying aspects of the world depicted in Orwell's 1984 is the total lack of privacy. The Masonic fraternity has too much experience with totalitarianism in recent years to view such demands and presumptions as benign. They may well be feared as a first step towards the ultimate suppression of Masonry, as has happened too often in the past. A further motivation for the keeping of secrets is that it promotes a form of mental self-discipline. There is a natural urge to share what we know with others. Gossiping and idle conversation consume more hours than perhaps any other human pastime. This tendency is rooted in the evolutionary origin of the human race, where the ability for one individual to share its experiences with the other members of the community conferred a significant survival advantage over non-communicating lower animals. Humans that did not share information with their fellows experienced negative selection pressure, in the words of the evolutionary biologist. Later, as society developed, the selective ability to refrain from communicating acquired importance. We all know someone who cannot keep a secret, and such a person usually does not merit our trust in other matters either. Keeping the secrets of a brother Master Mason, or of the fraternity as a whole, teaches us responsibility for the property of others, and shows that we merit the trust and confidence of our brothers and fellows. The various Masonic penalties, although symbolic, should remind us of the seriousness of our undertakings, and reinforce in us the mental toughness to carry them out. Masonic secrecy is thus seen to be no mere idle device, such as those secrets with which many children may twit their playmates. Rather, it serves numerous purposes, both to unite the craft and benefit the individual member. We gain from secrecy a sense of the value of what we have come to Masonry to learn. We learn the lessons better for the way in which we learn them, and we develop worthwhile mental resources from the discipline of keeping the details of Freemasonry private. When next we are challenged by an outsider on the old-fashioned nature of belonging to a secret society, there is no need to make excuses for it. Masonic secrecy is not merely an ancient tradition. It is a vital characteristic of our fraternity that we should cherish and protect. No less than the democratic tradition of the secret ballot, we should be prepared to defend our right and duty to keep secret that which is uniquely ours as our Masonic legacy to those who will follow us. This article originally appeared in the Scottish Rite Journal. Alright, and finally today we have an article titled The Search for Masonic Truth, Big T versus Little T, by Worshipful Brother Edward A. Rund, Wilmette Park, number 931 in Illinois. The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Johnny, don't you lie to me, I want the truth. Ye shall know the truth. The truth shall make you free. The naked truth, truth or consequences, the game of truth or dare. All our lives, we've been exposed to the word. Yet, what does it really mean? We define truth as not a lie. William James, the pragmatic philosopher, defines it as what works. Philosophers such as Plato, Augustine, Aquinas, Descartes, and Spinoza define truth as the correspondence between mind and reality. Yet, idealistic philosophers such as Berkeley and Hume said there is no such thing as objective truth. Close your eyes and the world disappears. Those around us are just pretending to hear and see the same things. So in the words of Oscar Wilde, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Yet, we must come to grips with it as Masons, because it is generally agreed that the ultimate objective of Freemasonry is the persistent search for truth. As each of you likely have, I have studied and struggled through my years as a Mason to understand and apply the precepts of Freemasonry to my life. The fact that so many of these guides to an improved life are veiled in symbolism, allegories, and metaphors only makes the search and understanding more difficult. I believe the veiling is done for a number of reasons. To hide the content from the dilettante and the profane, to cause one to struggle to learn and apply so that its value is enhanced and lessons long-lasting, to provide a level of abstraction permitting a broader scope of interpretation, thus offering greater opportunities for application. And lastly, the developers of our ritual did not possess the full truth themselves. Let's take, for example, a most prominent set of precepts. Our principal tenets of brotherly love, relief, and truth. The real meaning of each concept is cloaked in the very veiling process mentioned above. How much more difficult the search becomes for the less frequently identified moral guides buried deep within our ritual. I found a good bit of discussion related to brotherly love and relief, but a fairly small amount has been focused on the Masonic concept of truth. As I began to generally read up on the topic, even going back to ancient Greece and Rome, looking at the truth from philosophical, religious, and ethical viewpoints, I began to slowly slip into a quagmire of confusion and complexity. At that point, I decided to get help. So I set up a series of roundtable discussions, drawing in Masonic scholars and writers in the northern Illinois area. This proved to be quite helpful in organizing the general thoughts and concepts regarding what Masonry means by truth. To set a conceptual framework, I divided this thought into two categories: terrestrial, or what lies behind the nature of things, both animate and inanimate, and scientific experimentation, or the search for truth through acquiring knowledge. The latter has brought us a great way along the path to understanding our universe. The other category is celestial, or what lies beyond our physical plane both in time and place, and the consideration of the deity. This is unknowable, yet philosophy has helped us to speculate, in particular our Masonic philosophy. I've labeled the first of these two categories, the terrestrial, as little t truth. The second, the celestial, or what Mackey calls divine truth, as big T truth. The application of these searches is directed at what I call the continuum of totality. Little t equals birth, life, and death. Big T equals afterlife, immortality, and deity. These are the great truths that we seek. Where did I come from? What is the purpose of my earthly existence? And where am I going after death, or what we conceive of as the immortality of the soul? Let's look at little t first. In our first degree lecture, we learn about our relations to other people. Truth is the divine attribute and the foundation of every virtue. To be good and true is the first lesson we are taught in Masonry. On this theme we contemplate, and by its dictates endeavor to regulate our actions. Hence, while influenced by this principle, hypocrisy and deceit are unknown among us. Sincerity and plain dealings distinguish us, and the heart and tongue join in promoting each other's welfare and rejoicing in each other's prosperity. This, I believe, is an injunction against one of people's most destructive behaviors, that of making one feel better about oneself by putting another down. Thus, moral truth exists when our speech and actions conform to our thoughts. But how do we know what is true beyond our thoughts? Our relation to the tangible, concrete world beyond our skin can only be apprehended through our five senses. What data we take in through these and reflect upon becomes truth to the individual. Yet it must always be subjective or limited to one's perspective. We are bound by the limits of our experience and reasoning or intuitive capacities of our mind. There are limits to what we can interpret and make sense of from sensory data. As Lucretius wrote, the failing to grasp truth is not in our senses, but in our minds. This is a variation of the statement of Solon, who was asked if he had given his countrymen the best laws. He answered, "The best they are capable of receiving." This holds for finding greater degrees of truth or more light. We may approach truth, whether big T or little t, in a variety of ways. The first, rational cognition using reasoning and logic. The second, practical experimentation or scientific method. The third, intuition and analysis. And the fourth, speculation. The latter two seem more fitted to big T, though. We must ask, how can our finite minds conceive of the infinite, no more fully than we who live in a three-dimensional world could explain it to one who lives in only the two dimensions of length and width. Yet one segment of this thinking says that the more greatly we know ourselves, the more we can grasp the absolute, or big T, truth as deity is with us. We can never on this side of the veil achieve full understanding of the continuum of totality, but we can approach it by persistent endeavor of introspection. It is the trip, not the destination. Victor Papau, a brother and friend from Manitoba, summarizes this as follows. Indeed, we may find that the craft's 3 degrees seem purposefully designed to incorporate truth in all its forms. The first degree stresses the importance of truth, and of truth being the basis of correct living a virtuous life in alignment with the principles of society and with deity. The second degree stresses the importance of truth revealed through the application of the arts and sciences and through the 5 senses. Finally, the third degree offers us a glimpse of what may lie beyond ourselves, a transcendental glimpse that perhaps we can know more about ourselves and of deity. The third degree offers us a chance to psychologically reinvent ourselves to cause growth and new awareness, where before there might not have been an opportunity. We often think of being raised in the third degree as a symbolic resurrection into the immortal realm. Might it rather be symbolic of our being raised to a higher level of consciousness and exposure to greater truths? I will close with a quote from Brother Albert Pike in his book Morals and Dogma. We are not to relax in the pursuit of truth, nor contentedly acquiesce with error. It is our duty always to press forward in the search, for though absolute truth is unattainable, Yet the amount of errors in our views is capable of progressive and perpetual diminution, and thus Masonry is a continual struggle towards light. All right, that's all that we have time for this week. Thank you so much for listening again. Stop back by next week when Brother Robert will be back with another excellent episode. In the meantime, stop by our website at wcypodcast.com and make sure you click on the support the show links there. While you're there, pick up a pin. The pins that have been designed for us are just absolutely beautiful. I love wearing mine all over the place, really. If you happen to see me when you're out and about, stop me and ask for a pin. I usually have a couple that I carry with me just in case. So that's all for this week. I'm Adam Thayer. We'll see you later.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Be sure to join us for our next edition.